And I realized when I was presented the opportunity with multifamily that it really was just like my accounting practice. I specialized in small businesses, and
Uh-huh.
a complex is its own small business. Like it has its own
True.
ecosystem. Everything is kind of self-contained. And so it was just a perfect segue from
Jacqueline and Melvin Landry, and we welcome you to our podcast, Get Diversified. Throughout these series, we'll cover all the topics and questions you have about investing in apartment buildings, storage facilities, and mobile home parks. Being knowledgeable in these areas will help you feel more comfortable about investing. Apartment investing equals building wealth. Building wealth equals financial freedom. Achieving financial freedom allows you to spend your time with building memories with your loved ones. Let's face it, time is the one element in life that is limited, and you don't.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Get Diversified Show. We are here again. I'm your host, Melvin Landry, and today we have a fantastic guest, a lady who lives, breathes, and works in asset management day in and day out. So I want to introduce everyone to Cyndee Harding. So, Cyndee, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk asset management.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. It's a pleasure to have you here on the show, and looking forward to speaking to you. So, Cyndee, won't you tell the listeners a little bit about you, how you got into real estate, and how asset management became the passion?
Okay. Well, I had my own accounting business for about 25 years and sold that business and did a few other adventures and then landed on real estate.
Okay.
And I realized when I was presented the opportunity with multifamily that it really was just like my accounting practice. I specialized in small businesses, and
Uh-huh.
a complex is its own small business. Like it has its own
True.
ecosystem. Everything is kind of self-contained. And so it was just a perfect segue from accounting to go into asset management. So, and I
Okay.
love it. I love the numbers. I love having a project where we have a goal that's defined, and our whole goal is to make sure that property is profitable, that our investors are happy, and that our residents love where they live. They know that people care about them, and we have their best interests at heart.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for sharing that. Hey, so let's talk about the notion of think about your first property that you had the opportunity to manage the asset. So, I want to share with the listeners what was that property like? Were there any challenges going into it from your first one out, and what were some key learnings for you that very first property?
Well, actually, the property itself is a unicorn. Was just an amazing property.
Uh-huh.
However, the
Okay.
process of getting it was such a tough one. I just thought, oh, if this is the way multifamily is, I don't know if I can handle it. The
Oh.
process, it was just, the seller was not a nice person.
Oh.
And yeah, we had a lot of challenges with the seller. Once we got past all that and actually acquired the property, it's a beautiful property. It definitely has been profitable for our investors. The people that live there love living there. We have some that have been there a really long time. But the
Okay.
seller he definitely presented some issues. One that he did that I don't know, I have a hard time with is he cut the electricity. What happened was we had to push our closing 2 weeks, which is typical. Sometimes you have
Okay.
to move it.
Typical.
But what he did is he cut the electricity to the common areas on our original close date. So for 2 weeks, our residents did not have lights in their stairwells, didn't
Oh.
have lights in the parking lot, and basically blamed, well, it's your new owners. And we had no way of knowing because we weren't on site. Our property management wasn't on site yet. And so for 2 weeks, those poor residents suffered.
Wow. So you envision that to seller being petty, I would assume,
Hmm.
right? It was
Yeah.
wow, wow, wow.
Yeah, because we
So
had to push it out 2 weeks.
wow, okay. So what? Well, okay, that leads to another segue here. So of course, so that's it's a little bit of rocky relationship, right? With your new tenant base. So
Hmm.
What did you all do as an asset manager or asset management team to kind of soothe that over to get residents kind of back in a happy place? As you can imagine, I'm sure there were a few complaints,
Oh
probably
yeah,
a few calls.
absolutely. Yeah,
I'm sure your phones kept ringing, right? So you want to share what was I guess, a risk mitigation plan to keep those tenants happy?
exactly. So as soon as we found out, it was a Friday,
Uh-huh.
and
Oh,
so we contacted Home Depot because we were going to bring in the exterior lights that you can rent, the big ones that they have. So that's what we were
yeah.
going to do. So we got a hold of
Okay.
them. But our property management team that we had hired, they were on the ball. They were down there 8 o'clock in the morning. What happened is they went Thursday night just to kind of look at the property before taking over Friday and realized there were no lights in the parking lot. So they knew, like, right then there was an issue. So at 8 o'clock, when utilities opened, they were there. And they're like, hey, we got to get these lights turned on. Um, the property manager actually, she wrote a personal check for $8,000 right then so they would put those lights on. I mean, we
Mm,
reimbursed her
of
immediately,
course.
but I mean, we were just this team. Like, we were not going to have our residents, have this situation where they didn't have lights in their stairwell or lights in the parking lot. So they got it turned on. They immediately put out a letter, that
Hmm.
they had taken over and addressed it and said, the lights were cut, 2 weeks early, but they're, as you can tell, you can see they're back on. And thankfully they did that. He also had scheduled for the water to be turned off first thing Friday morning. And if you've ever bought a property, you don't own it first thing in the morning. It is late afternoon before
Yeah.
the keys transfer. So they would have gone a whole day without water. But because they were on top of it, we had really worked hand in hand with them, with this property. So they helped us really mitigate a lot of problems. And then that was a Friday. So then Monday they had an open house and they just put out a letter saying, stop by the office on your way home on Monday. And they just had some refreshments and introduced themselves to the residents. And he had actually owned the property for 40 years. So new owners was definitely a new concept. They had never experienced that before. But I feel like we really, really pulled it all together and came out where they were happy. And then, of course, we immediately started to do anything that was not taken care of. So they knew that we were there to make sure for their safety. And we wanted them to love where they live. That's our whole thing is we want people to feel safe and we want them to feel like that's their home. Where they live is their
Okay.
home.
Okay. Now, you mentioned 40 years ownership from the seller. So I'm assuming this was probably at this point in time a Class C property that you guys had acquired. Was it a heavy value add lift, or just what was the dynamics behind that particular property? If you want to, feel free to share a location as well if you wish. If not, that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So it's a 1980s build. It
Mhm.
actually is a B property. It's in
Okay.
Vicksburg, Mississippi,
Okay.
and it's adjacent to a golf course.
Oh,
It
nice.
is surrounded by mature trees. It's definitely kind of set back. It feels very exclusive when you're there. You definitely feel a lot of privacy. So it was a really actually a light value add. The one thing that we did is every he did not standardize upgrades. So we
Mhm.
basically went in, kind of assessed where everything was, and then we set a goal. This is where we want all of the units to be. So anytime someone moved out, we just had different upgrades, so we
Yeah.
could have a whole standard. So now we've owned it 2.5 years, and I would say all but maybe five are standardized, and those people are still there. So
Okay.
but yeah,
Okay.
because we definitely wanted to have it all upgraded, and he had just done here and there. So yeah.
Okay. That's good to know. So I guess another question worth asking in terms of you took it over, right, with
Mhm.
standard upgrades. You guys kind of went a level and beyond. What were you able to see in terms of increases in your rent percentage and overall net operating income? So I want to give the listeners a sense in terms of you came in with a game plan. There were a few hiccups coming in, right? And
Yeah.
2.5 years now, you should be able to see. some stability in terms of your net operating income as well as your rent. So how are we looking now? You say it's a unicorn. So let's
It is a
explain to it.
unicorn.
Yeah.
So we bought it at the end of March, so that only gave us 3 quarters, and we offered a 7% preferred return, and we
Mhm.
actually met our pref in 2 quarters, which is unusual.
Wow.
So we were
Amazing
we
time
were
to
able to
interrupt.
raise
Yeah.
rents,
Wow.
and now 2.5 years later, like we meet our pref pretty quickly in the within the first 2 quarters, and then Class B gets paid, and then we split with the investors. But like I said, it's a unicorn, so it's just one of those properties. It runs really smooth. Um, we've had a little bit of transition with personnel as far as our maintenance. That's been
Mhm.
probably the biggest struggle. Um,
Okay.
is maintenance. Vicksburg isn't a very big town, but one of the ways that we kind of offset that is we bought 3 more properties in Vicksburg.
Oh, really?
so
Okay.
so now we have 4 properties there. And what we've been able to do is create our maintenance that they actually can work at any of the 4 properties. And we just have them whatever their skill is. So we have a guy that really is good with ACs, you know, he's certified, so he does the ACs at all 4 properties. We have another maintenance that is a painter, so that's what he does between the 4 properties. So that's one way we were able to kind of uh, settle the issue with maintenance. Is we just bought
Yeah.
more
Yeah. Yeah.
properties.
Yeah. So it's a true exemplification of economies of scale,
Yes,
right? You've acquired, you've
yes,
grown, now
hmm
you're centralized, and you're able to leverage your guys across multiple properties, which it does two things, right? Keep those guys happy because now there's retention, right? To do more
yeah,
things, potentially opportunity to bring in more staff as you grow. So,
yeah.
yeah, so it's good. Good. Thanks for sharing that. So let's talk about Vicksburg, Mississippi, for a little bit. I'm from a one state over, Louisiana. That's where I grew up. So very familiar with the area. I have friends I went to college with that's from there as well. So, uh, why you like Vicksburg as a market, and what are you seeing particularly in that area? You went from 1 property to 4, so something's going right? Particularly.
I
So,
know.
can you
It's
share some
kind of
insights?
crazy. We love Vicksburg. It actually, so I will say when we first started with our first property, I didn't even know where Vicksburg was, I'll be honest. And I grew up in Florida, but I don't know.
Okay.
I just
Yeah.
wasn't that big into the States, I guess. And so I didn't even know where Vicksburg was. But it actually is on the border of Mississippi, Louisiana. The
Yeah.
Mississippi River is the border.
Yep.
So we are on the Mississippi River. It's very hilly. And so that was one of our investors' concerns when they hear that we're on the Mississippi. Like, is flooding going to be an issue? And it's not. We're like 5 miles from the Mississippi, and there's so many hills, it'd be a
Yeah.
tidal wave before it would
Yeah.
actually hit us. So that wasn't an issue. What we love about Vicksburg is the economy. It's such a
Hmm.
diverse economy. So it does have manufacturing. And I will say that the chamber, we worked with them very closely to understand what was going on in Vicksburg. It's about 30 minutes away from Jackson, which is the capital.
Capital. Yep.
And what they're doing is they're really trying to move it more into high tech so that people that are in technology or people that would work in Jackson could live in Vicksburg. Um, and so they really changed the demographics of it. It was a lot of blue collar years ago, and they've just been slowly, the chamber's very forward looking. And
Okay.
so they've created what's called My City. They took a 3-story 1950 brick hardware store and they turned it, it's downtown, it's right on the river, and they turned it into this technology center.
Okay.
So they have a couple of colleges that have satellite offices there. The chambers there, the Army Corps of Engineers has an office there. And then the downstairs, the main floor is like a coffee shop, but it also has really good Wi-Fi and set up for people to come in and be able to work. So, like I said, they're very forward thinking. The ports are in Mississippi, and if you know, in LA, we've had a lot of problems with the ports getting, barges in. And what they have done is they have worked on a city, county, state, federal level, and they have received funds to do a deep port. So they're in the process of doing that. It'll be done in 5 years. So what that's going to do is that's going to allow some of that congestion that we have in LA, to come up through the Mississippi. And there's a train there so they can offload the containers. And the rail system that goes through Mississippi or through Vicksburg is owned by the same company from Canada to Mexico. It's the only one in the United States that's owned by the same company. So it's just really diverse, and it has tourism. If you're a Civil War buff, there's all kinds of history there. So you have tourism. You also have a casino there, which brings people in. Viking Cruise Line has a tour. They built a boat just for the Mississippi River, and Vicksburg is one of the stops. So they have a terminal there, and they offer, different excursions. So they have really heavy tourism, but then, like I said, they have manufacturing that they do. There's a Continental Tire plant there. They have the paper, International Paper.
National paper. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So it's there. So, as far as the economy, it's just really strong and diverse, which is what we need.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Thanks for sharing that. Like I said, right, you always hear a lot of folks we talk to, right? They're in Florida, right? They're in Texas. Mississippi, right? Is a hidden gem. So for listeners out there, you kind of heard it straight from one of our core asset managers here, Cyndee. So appreciate you sharing that. So so I know Mississippi is like your little diamond in the rough. Any other markets that you're managing units in as well?
I do Kentucky, Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay.
I also have Lubbock, Texas.
Okay.
We're getting ready to do another property in Texas, and then I'm negotiating in Missouri and Oklahoma.
Okay. So you're pretty spread between that kind of core Sunbelt area, right?
Yeah.
And the center south of the U.S. So thanks for sharing that. So as you think about, right, your journey in asset management, what are some watch outs that you're like, you know what, it's nice, but I'll pass? Any 2 to 3 criteria points on your list when you're talking with your team, right? Because it's a team effort when you think about managing an asset. When you're dealing with tenants, you're dealing with your property manager and ensuring that you're giving them that best experience. So what are 2 to 3 kind of core watch outs that we're like, hey team, maybe we should pass on this opportunity? You want to share that?
Yeah. I like to be involved in the acquisition. So, I don't always have that luxury. Sometimes I get brought on afterwards. But if it's possible, I like to be with the acquisition just because, I go to the property when we do the due diligence. I actually go through I look at the leases. One of the properties that I took over, I went and did a lease audit. And as I'm going through it, I realized that the residents signed an addendum for pets and pet rent, but the current property management was not charging pet rent. So that was income just going straight out the door. So I like to do the lease audit. I like to look at the property. I like to watch the T12 and the rent roll as we're acquiring the property. I want to make sure we don't have any, big anomalies. The one thing I do say is, if you're looking at the T12 and there's a big expense in repair and maintenance, that doesn't mean there's a problem. Anytime there's a variance, all that means is there's a question. That's all it is. It doesn't mean that there's a problem. So it's just a question. So we want to find out if they did have a high repair and maintenance that month. Maybe it's because the current owner's taking care of something they need to take care of before we take possession. Mm-hmm. And so anytime that there's any kind of variance, I always tell people, don't be worried. Just know that this is a question. We're just going to ask the question, what is it? Once we know the answer, then we can deal with that. So some of the things that I like to watch for is I do watch to see if people are moving out. If there's quite a bit that people are not renewing, like why? I want to know, why are they not renewing? Is it something that we can take care of as the owners? Or is it something that the property management needs to take care of? So I like to ask those questions. I also like to watch and see how much have they, if we haven't purchased it, but we're in the process, how much have we allocated for CapEx?
Okay.
Because here's the situation. You buy the property, you usually have a value add that you talk to your investors and you say, we're going to do this, this, and this. Well, I need to make sure on my end that I can actually do that. Like that we have the funds set up for the CapEx for the things that we say that we're going to do. And then also I do a market survey to see if we can move the rents to what we have been told. Brokers, you know, I'm not going to say they lie, but they do the very best scenario. And
Mm-hmm.
so I need to make sure, is that really something that we can
Realistic.
do? Yeah. Is
Realistic.
it realistic? And so I do my own market survey of the area and I do my own underwriting just to make sure that what they're telling, they, meaning the team, what we're telling investors, we can actually do. Because I don't want to sign off on something and say, yes, we can do this if we can't. And so there have been some that I've just said, I just don't think that we can hit those marks, and I'm not the asset manager for you. Someone else would be better suited. So
Okay. All right. And also, let's talk about the economies of scale with your PM, with your property manager, who you're dealing with. So, for your example in Mississippi, you expanded from 1 to 4. Are you using the same property manager, or are you using different ones? And want to kind of share that where you're at in that journey right now?
yeah. So if it's an area that they're in, they are a national company, but they're not in every state.
Okay.
If they are in that area, then I do try to move the property to them,
Mm-hmm.
because I know that they will fulfill, what they say they're going to do. And I will say, when you're talking with a property management company, a lot of people think your on-site is key. And your on-site is the face of the property. So that is important because that is the first impression
Yep.
that people get of the property. But when you're dealing with asset management, your key is your regional, because I am not going to tell the on-site what to do. The regional tells the on-site what to do, not me. And
Okay.
so it's the regional that I have to work with, that they're the ones that create the budget, and we do that together because, they need to have a budget that is going to work, and we need to be able to work within that budget. And so it's the regional, I think, is your most important when you're talking with your property management. You just want to have a really good relationship with that regional.
Okay. And from your standpoint, how often do you try to get out to your properties? Because you're managing a lot now. So, but how does that look for you? Say a typical month. Do you try to touch them every few months, once a quarter, monthly? I mean, your unicorn, maybe not as much. How about your problem child? I know, I'm sure there's a problem child in every group
Yep.
of
There is
kids
always a
supporting each
problem
other,
child.
right? Yeah.
So I try to physically go to the properties at least once a year.
Okay.
If it's something that we've just acquired, I will obviously go for the due diligence, and then I'll probably go out again 6 months later just to make sure that we're where we need to be. Um, I talk with a property management company every week.
Hmm.
Um, my unicorn, I only talk with them every 2 weeks,
Okay.
but
All
all
right.
the rest, it's every week. We
Yeah.
just want to make sure that we're on track. Um, and then what we've done too is I have created an asset management team. And so usually it's comprised of limited partners that are interested in learning more about real estate. Maybe they want to be an asset manager, or they're already in multifamily, but it gives them a way to kind of learn the backside of what's going on. And so usually it's 5 to 7 people
Okay.
that create the team. And so I'll have Mondays are my property management calls. Tuesday are my asset management team calls. So they've actually been on the property management call, but they don't have their mics on or their cameras. They just kind of listen.
Yep.
And then the next day we talk about, okay, this is what's going on at the property. So, what are some ideas? What are some solutions? So we work together, and then they're able to learn more about multifamily in general.
Okay.
Through the team. And then I have a GP call on Wednesdays. So basically, I feel like I am an information gatherer. So on Mondays, I kind of assess where we are. I've been told I am a firefighter, a doctor, a detective, and a project manager.
There you go.
So I gather all that information on Mondays. Tuesdays, I meet with the asset management team. We come up with some possible solutions. And then on Wednesdays, I meet with the GP and I present them with, this is kind of what's going on. If this is an issue, here are some solutions, for them to make decisions on. So.
Okay. So here's another question for you, right? You're bringing solutions to the team, right, on Wednesdays, right? So is that typically, given your experience, you're managing a lot of properties, not every idea you present typically may be agreed to from the GP.
Oh, absolutely not.
It's the nature of it, right? So what would you say typical week, right? How many ideas you're bringing to the fold? New ideas? Are you hitting 100% on your ideas typically, or is it 50-50, or what? Or is it? I'm just curious. Because
it's probably a little bit. It's probably 75%.
Okay.
The biggest thing I think is it does take them a while to make a decision, and I'm usually on the GP. If I've been part of the acquisition, I am on the GP, but I'm a smaller percentage.
Yep.
So it takes a while for them to kind of come together and have a consensus, and this is what we're going to do moving forward. Okay. So I always have an agenda because, trust me, there's always items that we haven't closed out, and so I want to address that one more time. But yeah, but once we make a decision, it's good. But it takes a little while. But when you've got people you're trying to agree on things, it does. And sometimes they want to do their own research and, kind of come up with their own solutions. So, okay. And I'm not offended by that at all. I mean, sometimes that's why I love the asset management team, because sometimes someone comes up with an idea that never even crossed my mind. And it's like, wow, that's a great idea. And so, we present it.
Hey, this business is all about continuous improvement, right?
Yes.
We don't have all the answers, right? And they fresh, new ideas always encouraging, right? Again, right?
If I'm the smartest person in the room, I need to be in a different room.
That's correct.
I want people smarter than me.
That is so true. So, as you think about your journey in asset management, what would you say? What's one of the best pieces of advice someone has ever given you as you kind of jumped into your journey?
Well, if you're going to do asset management, I definitely feel like you want to have some accounting background. If you don't have that, then it's going to be really difficult because, you have to look at the financials. Something that people don't think about is the lender. Like the lender at the end of the day is the boss. I mean, that's the person, the entity that I have to make sure, because they're going to give us, when we purchase it, they're going to give us a list of items that need to be done. Some immediately, some 6 months, some a year. And if we don't adhere to that, then we literally have penalties and fines that we have to pay. And some people don't realize that, they just think asset management is just meeting with the property management company, which it is, but it also includes, making sure we hit all those benchmarks, with the investors, that we hit all the benchmarks with the lender. There's several people that you answer to, you answer to the GP. If the property's not performing, why? Anytime there's a variance, that's the time for a question. So, my advice would be to learn all that you can. Get on an asset management team if you can. It's a good way to learn. It's a very safe place to ask questions because it's just like 5 or 6 people, and we're basically talking about a property, and they can ask any questions they want. So it's a really good learning place.
Hey, thanks for sharing that intel, that advice in terms of other folks who aspire to really want to get into asset management, want to, it's almost like looking under the rug to ensuring that your rug's clean.
Yeah.
And it's profitable, right? Because at the end of the day, you got to take care of your investors. also ensuring that the lender is happy too, because in most cases,
Yeah.
they're putting up the biggest amount of the
Mm-hmm.
overall kind of financial pie. So
Yeah.
from that standpoint, so wow, this has been a great discussion. So you're managing a lot of assets right now. Is there a problem child in the bunch by chance that you're dealing with now that keeps you up at night, or from that standpoint, out of your properties that you're management, is there a problem child in the group right now? Just curious.
There's one.
Okay.
Yeah, there is. There always is. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it keeps me up at night. It's a continual, um, it's just every time we turn around, there's something happening.
Really.
You know,
Hmm.
there's just, there's just always something going on. So I think part of it is it's a little bit older, property. It is affordable housing. So, and one of the things that we're doing on this particular property, we've had it almost a year,
Okay.
is when we took it over, it was a lot of Section 8, and there was no pride in ownership for the residents. And so what we've done is we want to have affordable housing, but we also want tenants that are paying a portion of their rent. We want to help them. We want to help the person that's a cashier somewhere that, barely makes minimum wage, but they want to live in a nice place. So we want to provide that for them. But we want them to also have some skin in the game. And so the part of the problem is the residents weren't taking care of their portion of the property. So there was a lot of trash, their porches were a mess, and so we're like, no, we want to have residents in here. We want to give them the opportunity to live where they can afford it, and they can also get a safe place to live and a nice place to live. So, but we've been doing that. We've put in some things into place. One of the things we did was a credit score. So they have to have a minimum credit score to qualify to live there. So that's helped a little bit. And, and then we had a lot of evictions when we took it over, people that just weren't paying their rent at all. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
but
I mean,
once we moved out, those were the problems. We had about 10. Once we moved those out, got new residents in, it's made a big difference.
good. And I mean, it's a good, I guess, good depiction to describe, right? Some individuals come into this business thinking everything's going to be rosy, and like you mentioned, you're just managing the property manager. Even though myself, on a smaller front, I've dealt with affordable housing, and some of those issues that you brought up and mentioned, they do happen, right? There's affordability, which we all want to see, right,
Mm-hmm.
all across the country, right? We want folks to have affordable housing, but in many cases, you're going to get folks who are just not going to pay, and maybe try to abuse things, unfortunately. So
Yes.
taking the actions, being in front of it, and it's a good experience that you share, right? Because it's good for our listeners to kind of hear, right? Everything is not always rosy on each side of the ball. So
No. And when you have 10 evictions in 1 month, that hurts your bottom line.
that hurts the NOI hardcore.
Yeah, it
So
does, but it's a hit we had to take. We just had to do it.
hey, that's where you're being a seasoned veteran in here, and knowing sometimes you got to take drastic measures calls for it when the time needs it. So I'm glad that you're able to kind of align on your plan. I know it probably hurt when you kind of kick those individuals out, right? But
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I mean, hey, you're adherent to the business plan. I'm sure you're communicated to the investor base, and it's good to hear things are turning around. So that one outlier is now becoming a good
Yeah.
thing for you. So, well, Cyndee,
Yep.
hey, this has been great. It's good to kind of hear the good, the sometimes not good, and how you're addressing it, sticking to the business plan, and also communicating with your teams, right? Your core GP team and your investors.
Oh, yeah.
This is a process, right? And it's a large process, and you're a critical piece of that puzzle for the properties and the tenants that you serve. Which is, I mean, without your tenants, the
Yeah,
opportunity is not there, right? So
exactly.
good.
Yep. And we
Well,
want them to be happy. We want them to, like I said, we want them to call where they live home. We don't want it to be, just someplace that they just stop. We want them to have a home. So we want to provide those amenities, and we want it to be safe. And we want them to know that we care. Like we're aware of who they are and we care about them.
We care. We care. We care. On that closing note, well, Cyndee, I want to be the first to say thank you for taking your time out your busy morning. I know it's Monday, so that means Monday is asset management calls you probably got scheduled up here today.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, on behalf of myself, my wife Jacqueline, and the Moreland Equity team, we want to say thank you for taking the time out your day and speaking to us on asset management. The good, the issues that you may come up, and what it takes to be a superior asset manager in this environment. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.